Hi and welcome to the Money Carer podcast. This is our 11th episode now. We're starting to find our feet with this medium. And today I'm delighted to be joined by John Dentry, who's the product owner of a number of Pay.UK's switching services. And welcome to the podcast, John. And would you be so kind as to introduce yourself and your responsibilities and a bit about Pay.UK?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me on the show. So I am John Dentry. I am the product owner for Pay.UK's three switching services. They are the electronic cash ISA transfer service, the bulk payment redirection service, and the more well-known service, and what I'm here to talk to yourself about today, is the current account switch service, or more commonly known as CAS. Pay.UK itself is the payments authority that manages the guide and rules for three of the country's payment services. So that would be BACS, faster payments, and image clearing services. So the kind of new digital way of check processing. So they are obviously the flagship payment services, but alongside that, there are other services such as my switching services and other services that you may be aware of, such as confirmation of payee. That's Pay.UK and myself in a nutshell.
That's right. And I think we started talking. Is it 3 years ago, John? It's got to be now. Time flies, doesn't it? And I know I picked your brains about the bulk payment redirection service along the way as well. But I think it was the current account switching service, and obviously our interest as an organisation that supports vulnerable folk to progressing those conversations. And obviously we'll get onto that a bit later. But in terms of Pay.UK, obviously I know who you guys are. But when I talk about Pay.UK, I think because it was a relatively recent change from name change, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of people still remember you guys as your previous name as BACS. If you could just explain a bit about sort of how it came from BACS to Pay.UK, a bit of history would be great for our listeners, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially Pay.UK is the payments authority that owns the guide and rules to three payment services. Those are BACS, faster payments, and image clearing services, so the image checks, as it were. Previously, there were three separate entities, but we have now merged as one under this payment authority's banner known as Pay.UK. So alongside the flagship payment services, we have other services as well. So we have the switching services that I manage, and then there are other ancillary services such as confirmation of payee as well that fall under Pay.UK's banner.
That's right. And I think the purpose of this podcast is to really hone in on the current account switching service. And it's been around, I think quite a while now, John, hasn't it? I see the things on LinkedIn in terms of the milestones, but what are the numbers? What's the sort of reach these days?
So you are correct. So the CAS has been around now for over 10 years. It celebrated its 10th anniversary last September. In that 10 years, we did reach our 10 million switcher mark as well. So the service has now switched over 10 million current accounts in the UK. So in 2023, we switched a record just over 1.4 million switches, which, as it was its 10th anniversary, that was a great kind of milestone to achieve. We have 53 participating brands in the service as well. Recent stats. We just recently issued our quarterly dashboard. It's a performance dashboard that we published on our website.
Yeah, I've seen that.
In the first 3 months of the year, we processed over 320,000 switches. So from a performance perspective, in terms of numbers, CAS is doing extremely well, even after 10 years in service. It's attracting a large customer base, and I think it's the process that it offers. It's a very robust process. Its original intention was to facilitate a healthier switcher market, as switching your current account in the past was deemed as a difficult and arduous process. Many complications and challenges were happening, and issues were being caused for consumers when they were trying to switch their current account. And so there was a request for a easier automated solution, and so CAS was introduced. And essentially, it facilitates the switching of a retail or business current account within 7 working days. And within that process, it transfers all of your payment arrangements from the old account to the new account, so the likes of your direct debits and your standing orders. It does that automatically. it automatically closes the old account for you and automatically transfers your balance across to the new account. And one of the key items we always like to call out is the redirection facility that the service offers, is that once your switch completes, any payments that are erroneously made to your old account are redirected to your new account. So as a consumer, you don't know any difference. You see it on your bank statement that your direct debits are being collected correctly from your new account.
On that, John, in terms of the redirection of the payments into the old account, is that indefinitely after switch or is it time limited?
There is a mandatory period for the redirection to be in place for 36 months. So you've got a nice cushion there of 3 years for the redirection to continue. And then there is a process that happens afterwards, a review process. It's potentially, you could have that continuing indefinitely.
But would you have to, for example, if you had a payment coming in from, I don't know, your employer or the DWP in terms of benefit payments, there's a 36-month automatic redirection. Is it still good practice to inform the payers that of the new account details?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have controls and messaging in place that advise payee originators those redirected details and advise them of a redirection. We obviously have our own central reporting that we manage here at Pay.UK, and we work with our customers, our participating brands, to ensure effective communication, to ensure the new account details are updated. Also, you as a consumer, you may wish to, for peace of mind, undertake your own kind of administration from that perspective and reach out to, as an example, your direct debit, a company that you have a direct debit with, to let them know of the change in details. So yeah, we have controls and mechanisms in place like that.
That's great. And in terms of, if I was to change my account today and use the service, where does the responsibility lie? Is it my old bank? Is it the new bank that I'm going to? How's the baton handed over, so to speak?
Yeah, so in regards to the switch request itself, once you've opened your current account with your new bank, and they are a participating brand of CAS, and our current account switch website lists all of our participating brands, you would then request the switch with your new bank, and you can do that via, there's often with most of our organisations, there are a variety of options you can use. You can go into the bank branch and request the switch. You can do so via a telephony service, via your mobile app, or online banking via an account switch request form, or secure online banking. So through your secure online banking credentials, and then access a request form from there. So there's a variety of options that are at your disposal. And then once the new bank receive that switch request, obviously then the switch process starts in the sending of messages between the new and old bank. Effectively, then at that point, the switch is covered by what we call the current account switch guarantee, that ensures those items that I listed around the transfer of the payment arrangements, transfer of the balance, etc., the redirection elements. But also it states that should anything go wrong with your account switch, the new bank is responsible for helping you and finding resolution, and seeking resolution to support you.
That's great. I'm assuming, John, that the majority of switches are done online. Are they people literally starting the process that way, or what's the breakdown of sort of numbers into how people actually switch? Or
so in terms of the proportion of digital and branch-based switching, with that granular level of detail at our hands, but we are very much aware that with the rise in digital banking in general, there is naturally a rise in digital switching requests. And that, and I say digital, that can be on a website or via the mobile applications that are becoming even more popular. That was on the rise prior to the COVID pandemic, but I would certainly say that COVID expedited that push and increase into the more digital digital age and digital.
As in many other areas as well, in terms of move towards digital. And is there, without not necessarily going into sort of numbers and what have you, are more people switching from, I'll say, traditional banks, legacy banks, to another legacy bank, or are you getting people moving from a legacy bank to one of the new fintech organisations, the neobanks?
It's a good question, and it's something that our quarterly dashboard actually presents. We have a section of the quarterly dashboard that shows the net gains, winners and losers, essentially, from a switching perspective. So it lists customers switching performance 3 months in arrears. So the previous dashboard that was issued in April provides the general statistics for January to March, but the customer net gain the previous quarter, so the last quarter of last year. Over the years, I think it's been varied. There were, I would say, probably casting my mind back to maybe 3 years ago, we saw a consistent run of where some of the challenger, digital-only challenger banks such as Starling and Monzo do very, very well and score quite high switching gains. But since, I would say since the pandemic, and I'm trying to cast my mind back, it could be even, I would say more 2022, when we saw more switching incentives for consumers. So primarily cash. So, switch to said bank and you will receive a cash incentive for doing so. We've seen a kind of an increase in cash incentives from more providers. And varying amounts as well, some as high as £200 to switch your bank account, and they're being offered by what we kind of call the legacy incumbent banks, and so we're seeing now a shift.
Fighting back against the challengers.
Well, yes, it's obviously proving a very interesting and appetite, appetite.
That's great, and I guess all of that activity is serving to create awareness about this, which is all good. And again, I guess awareness is one of the reasons why we wanted to get together and do this podcast and talk about vulnerable groups, obviously, which MoneyCare are primarily focused in supporting. And obviously, you guys are really, really keen to, I guess, to create a bit more awareness around that sector. And could you explain a bit more about sort of where you're going with that and what your ambitions are in terms of reaching more people in the vulnerable sector?
Yeah, sure. So we have a regulated KPI, an awareness KPI, to ensure that essentially awareness of the service, people are aware of the service. So it's a 75% target of a mass awareness that the UK population are aware of the current account switch services. But within that, digging into the detail, we have a series of sub-audiences that we also need to focus on in terms of awareness. That sub-audience is overdraft users, 18 to 24s, SMEs, high credit balance users, and financially vulnerable, which obviously is kind of one of the primary conversation points for today. So we track awareness with these groups because there is more of a, within these groups, there's more perceived barriers to switching. You take an overdraft user, there's that understandable, I don't think I can switch my bank account because I have an overdraft, which that is not true. CAS allows you to switch. If you have an overdraft, CAS does still allow you to switch. You just need to, when opening up your new account, understand what the overdraft facility is with your new bank first of all. So we want to break down those barriers, and one way of doing it, certainly we have huge amounts of marketing that we undertake. We have our current account switch campaigns, advertising campaigns. The latest one is Spike the Goldfish, and the advert of the man trying to get the goldfish. We will do advertising based on that campaign through all of our social media channels such as X, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. I'm glad I said X. I've been saying Twitter for months. We have advertising on posters, on buses, even murals that we've done of Spike the Fish in recent times. And previously, before that, maybe it's time to switch campaign with the man with the 80s style haircut and the lady with the
That's
big.
Right, I remember that one. Yeah.
Previously, before that, it was the switch guarantee guy. So we've our history of the of switching campaigns has been in place ever since the service has been around, and it is around the idea of awareness. But alongside that, in terms of the sub-audiences, we undertake huge amounts of research, really get into the detail of understanding those barriers, and not necessarily understanding the barriers to switching as well, but in terms of what about switching do you think is a problem or a challenge for yourself. It could be just what other macro factors in your life are, meaning I'm not actually concerned about switching at the moment. It could be, for example, a sole trader who's just concerned about keeping his business going and ensuring the latest project they're working on is running to spec, etc. Switching is just in the background at the moment, and that kind of intel for us is absolutely vital, and it really helps us factor in future marketing and future advertising. And we are currently undertaking a piece of research at the moment on financially vulnerable, and that research follows a very similar path in terms of we do stakeholder engagement interviews, and you've been very kind to support with Pay.UK on that front. And we do huge amounts of desk-based research and everything, and it all comes together into a series of output that we then try and share in the wider community. We will do so again via social media, through our own communications, and we share it with our own customers, our participating organisations, for them to take advantage of. And that's been the way for a long time that we've kind of worked and managed awareness. The really exciting thing for me with appearing on this podcast and working with yourself for, like you say, quite a few years now, is it opens up a new channel, as it were, for Pay.UK to really, work on that awareness piece in a different way than we've done before. It's utilising and widening our stakeholder engagement reach. I really hope we can do increase essentially, and it's been, I find this, working with yourself and MoneyCare to be a really great start on that front.
We're very excited. Well, as we're sure we'll have access to the current account switching service, which obviously we're delighted. It's an ongoing project, and we're nearly there now, which is great. But I think when we've had these conversations before, John, I think we've agreed the marketplace, the customers that we serve and support, it's quite fragmented in terms of reaching those groups, and that's, I think, one of the ways that in terms of promoting awareness about the current account switching service, we can certainly help with that. I think to drill into that in a bit more detail, we know fine well at MoneyCare that lots of our clients are supported to manage their finances in different ways. They have different challenges in life, and I think by spreading awareness through us having access to the service, I think will help reach some of those people and plant that seed in with the organisations, local authorities, law firms who act as deputy attorney, for example, that they can actually, this is a consideration, a best interest consideration in many cases for their clients, where they perhaps haven't considered this before. And then for lots of our clients who are quite independent, can make their own decisions, but they probably aren't picking up on those wider advertising campaigns that we just discussed before. And it really is about reaching them in different ways, perhaps through their support workers, their carer network, care organisations, that sort of thing, that will present this as an option for them. So we're really excited to take things forward. And as I said, particularly because we have at MoneyCare, all of our clients in one way or another have some sort of vulnerability, we're very keen to open this up in our platform so that not just organisations that support vulnerable folk, but lots of people that we engage with are family members who are supporting loved ones with their finances. And again, we hope to reach that audience as well in terms of accessibility of the service and spread awareness in the round. So, John, just obviously the main thrust of the podcast today is to talk about the current account switching service. But with regard to the other switching services, obviously I'm familiar with the bulk payment redirection service, but I wanted to just give a brief explanation as to what that is and how it's slightly different from the current account switching service.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned earlier that CAS facilitates business switching, or we have a set criteria for the type of business that can switch its account through CAS. So it's all around numbers of staff with the business and the annual turnover. Yeah. And essentially that kind of excludes large corporates. BPRS is a solution to a large corporate who say have gone out to tender for new banking business, have been accepted an offer from a new banking provider, and as part of the acquisition program to move from their old provider to the new, they or their new bank can reach out to Pay.UK, and it'll be myself that they deal with, to take advantage of our redirection facility, the same one that's used for CAS, and to set up a redirection facility for the accounts that they have to migrate over to the new provider. It doesn't come with all the bells and whistles as CAS does, so the transfer of the payment arrangements and the transfer of the balance, etc., that has to be managed separately between the old and new provider, and it's just that redirection facility. But just that facility, it's a keen draw for either large corporates or banks because it's payment protection at the end of the day.
And I suppose, thanks for that, John. I suppose with Pay.UK, in terms of some of the product names, I guess the explanation's in the name. It's the bulk payment redirection service. the current account switching service. So I guess that means it has to be from current account to current account, not from a savings account to a current account. And I think you mentioned it's the ISA switching service. And if you could explain a little bit about that, but I'm assuming it's ISA to ISA in the same sort of, the name's on the tin, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, no, you're right. So this was actually our first switching service. So the cash ISA transfer service has been, the electronic cash ISA transfer service has been around for over 11 years now. But it does, yes, it's the same process, as it were. It facilitates the switching of a cash ISA balance from a seeding provider to an acquiring provider. It facilitates the transfer of cash ISAs to other cash ISA accounts. It does the same for junior ISAs. It can also facilitate the transfer of a cash ISA to a stocks and shares ISA as well. And from my memory, we have 83 participating brands who operate in that space. So yeah, so they're the three services that I manage.
And John, just on the current account switching service in an international theme, I'm assuming if I have a UK bank account and a Spanish bank account, current accounts, I can't switch one to the other. It's purely a UK scheme, but I'm assuming that in Europe they have a similar scheme.
Well, you are correct. It is from one UK current account to another. We are aware that there are other switching type services out in the market. In terms of kind of their breadth and the offerings compared to how CAS works, I've so far not come across any that are exactly similar and do the same thing. I cannot comment that.
You're basically saying ours is better, John, aren't you?
I couldn't comment on that,
Couldn't
Sean.
possibly say, of course.
but there are other services. There are similar services, certainly, not just Europe. But the globe, yeah.
Around the world. Well, listen, John, I really thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy man, and I know our audience will be very grateful for going into the details about how CAS works and the ins and outs of it. And always great to talk to you, John. And once again, thanks for your time. And no doubt we'll be catching up soon enough anyway.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much again, Sean. Thanks for your time.
If you have a question you would like to raise for a future Money Carer podcast, or if you have any comments on anything you've heard today, then do please get in touch with us at info@moneycarer.org.uk. Thanks for listening.